Welcome to Voracious Podcast. Today, my guest is Connor Nealing.
Thank you.
Yeah, how's it going?
It's going good. I'm excited to be a part of the podcast. It's been a minute since I've been behind a mic, so it's going to be a good time for sure.
Yeah, it's always a good time. I don't know if I help anybody or come across making any kind of sense, but it's a good time. What's your background? Where are you from?
Well, man, that's a loaded question. So grew up, born and raised, small town in Michigan.
Okay.
Grew up with my family there, 4 older brothers. I'm the youngest of 5. Grew up in a Christian household, but was progressively church hopping.
Okay.
So we'd be going to a church, and then we felt like we had gotten everything that we could, and the Lord would lead us to the next church. And throughout that whole time, I was homeschooled. Never really had a desire to go into ministry or anything like that. I really wanted to go into, by the time I was in high school, computer programming. Had an encounter with God and knew that wasn't what I was going to be going into.
Oh.
And so
Funny how that works.
It's funny how that works. I had my life planned out, and everything got shattered in a moment, and then just started seeking Him for my next steps in life. And a couple years later, next thing you know, I'm moving down to Texas to go to ministry school. Thought I was going to be coming here to LCU to move back to Michigan after 13 weeks.
Yeah.
And the Lord just kept telling me to keep staying, keep going, went through the internship program, and now I'm on staff here.
There you go.
And then in the meantime, got married as well. So that's a big plus as well.
When was that exactly?
So we met January 2020, right when I moved down here. But neither of us were really interested in each other. It's a really fun story. But
that's a good start.
Yeah.
It is.
And then the Lord encountered both of us separately. And then in April, we started dating, got engaged in September of 2020, got married May 2021.
Whoa.
Yeah. So a little fast paced, but not typical for your ministry school. Normally they would get married in about 6 months. We waited about a year.
Yeah. It was, it didn't take my wife and I long to figure out we wanted to get married as well. So I totally understand.
It's a great moment with the Lord for sure.
Yeah. And when you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, really. Well, just want to have a little fun. Wanted to have Connor on. I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to play around with this AI chat. What is it? Chat GPT?
Chat GPT. Yep.
PPG. I don't know.
I had never even really heard of it until one of my old roommates was like, "Hey, check out this. Like AI is developing like crazy." I was like, "Okay, what is this?"
Yeah.
It's like, ask it any question. So then I was getting prepared to teach my Colossians elective. So I was like, 4 points on the book of Colossians.
Yeah.
Like 2 minutes later, it's got like the 4 main points of the book of Colossians. And I was like, oh, this is actually really intuitive.
Yeah,
so
it is. And I like to listen to Jordan Peterson a lot. And this was a little while ago when ChatGPT, I think, first came out, and he was telling people about it. He said he asked it to, gosh, how did he, you know how he phrases things so perfectly. But anyway, he asked it to write you know how he has the 12 rules for life?
Yes.
And then 12 more rules in
Yes.
his other book, Beyond Order. He asked it to write a 13th rule based off of his book, and then using like the Bible a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
And using D.I.S.C, and like bring all those together, basically, is what he asked it to do. And he said it did it perfectly and gave him a 4-page essay that he couldn't really tell that he didn't write himself.
Wow. Wow.
So that's really awesome, but it's really kind of frightening.
Yeah,
at the same time.
I'm like, my feelings are about 50-50 of like, this is great, but also I'm like, this is very outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I know society's progressing that way, but I don't know how I feel about it yet.
Yeah. And what is it going to change exactly? You know, what are the ramifications? I think that I know that like a lot of college students and stuff now, even high school students are just using it to write their essays.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, wow, well, that's just going to have to change the way we do our testing.
Absolutely.
It's going to have to, or else you're just going to, everybody's going to do that. It's like what?
My biggest, I don't want to say, it is a fear. My biggest fear is is that it's just going to create the U.S. to become more illiterate.
Yeah.
And further behind in the world race when it comes to education, because everything's going to be automatically done for us.
Yeah.
And
we won't know why or how it does it. We don't care. We're just like, oh, well, this is what AI says. Yeah. So it must be true.
So you're going to produce a lot of people who are AI smart, but the moment that gets taken away from them,
right?
What are they going to do in society?
Oh, and by the way, I have a couple of Joe Biden isms programmed right there. If you ever just need to end a phrase or a comment, just push one of those, and there's 2 different ones, and we'll end it with nonsense.
Oh, I'm so excited to try this.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's pull up Chat GBT here. What is a good podcast topic? Oh, spell topic. I wish I had this on the feed. I'm not that
fancy yet.
Not that fancy.
Is this an app or are you just on the website?
I'm on chat.openai.
Okay, cool.
Oh man, it's got already 4. It's typing out things.
Oh my goodness.
Pop culture, politics, science and theology. So it just gave me a generic list. It didn't give me a specific question. So I think I have to get a little more specific.
There you go.
Are you on there as well?
I am trying to get on there.
Okay.
There we go.
Agree to.
I had to re-enable cookies on my phone.
Oh.
The same stable geniuses said the biggest problem we had in the Revolutionary War is we didn't have enough airports. Whoa.
Oh, come on. Get some more airports in the Revolutionary War, Joe. Okay, so then you must be pretty politically savvy then.
I don't think so.
No?
I like listening to people who are politically savvy.
Okay.
But me personally, I really am. I'm really not. I see the world in black and white.
Okay.
Pretty much. To me, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong.
Amen.
And there are people I know and people that are friends of mine that see the world differently and will argue the gray areas of life, and that's all good. I just don't see it. It's really hard for me to wrap my head around doing something bad to make something good happen.
Yeah.
Like what if you lied to your wife about the way she looks when she's asking you, does this outfit make me look like? I would rather just not answer that question. I'll dance around it if I feel like that's a trap question, which it always, I think, well, maybe not always, but sometimes it's just like, how do I look? Do I look decent? Do I look good? And I'm like, yeah, like, of course. Like, I always think my wife looks great.
Absolutely.
By the way.
Yes.
So, I don't know. What do you think about that? How do you see the world?
Yeah, I mean, politics is something that I've definitely gotten more involved in as I've gotten older. I remember my first election, I had just turned 18, I believe.
And that was who?
That was Trump's first election.
Okay.
So I got super politically involved in that one because I was a never Trumper at first. I thought it was the joke, just like a lot of people. But then I started looking at, my biggest thing when I go into politics is I look at their policies. I look at the extent and the magnitude of their policies. And then I look at it in a sense of, is this actually capable? Are they actually capable of doing this? So for that election, one of his contenders who I really wanted was Ben Carson. I looked at Ben Carson's policies, and he had a whole list of reform and everything that he was going to do, where Trump had like 6.
Yeah.
And so then I'm looking at it more from a management standpoint of like, if I have somebody come in and they're going to promise me to completely reform every aspect of this business in 2 days, that's not possible.
Right.
But if they say, hey, I'm going to make this one aspect really good, they would be able to do it. So I would say I pretty much view the world similarly. What is your DISC profile? Do you remember?
My DISC profile?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Did you ever have to take it?
Yeah. So for people who don't know what DISC is, it's basically just a personality profile that a lot of companies use. And they use different forms of that to see what your general personality is and what your personality is under stress.
Yeah.
And how good, like how to work with you in a work environment is. And it's a pretty good, I think, a baseline. I don't think it's the end all of things. But so the first one I took said I was SC. Okay. So relational and informational, like information gathering. I don't like to make a move or decision without all the information possible.
Yeah.
And then the S, so that's the C part. The S part is relational. So we, like if we were in business together, we wouldn't make a move if we weren't good.
Yeah.
Like if something's off, we're not talking about business. We're going to fix what's off first.
Yes.
So I don't think those are bad traits to have. However, I do think that for whatever reason, businesses look for a pretty high D profile most of the time because they're the get things done type.
Yep.
And the funny thing is I took a whole different, it's still a DISC test, but it's a little different in that it looks for specifically how do you function in this environment at work. And that's all it looks at.
Oh, wow.
And so at work in go mode, I am straight D all the way.
Wow.
Which is fascinating to me.
Very.
Yeah. So like the one we took, it shows you like, I think three or four different possibilities of where you're at.
Yep.
And so this one, it only showed you one. It was like, no, when you're at work, you're in go mode, you're this. And I'm like, well, okay. But on that interview, that job interview, I had actually told him, I was like, I don't think this is exactly accurate. You know?
Yep.
And but I don't think the other one I took is exactly accurate either. But so I'm somewhere in the land of SC, and then there's a D there somewhere that's just to get it done. And the problem with the get it doners is they don't care about how you're feeling that day.
Absolutely. Yep.
Like show up to work and do your job, and what's to talk about? Like, can you do it or not? And there is an aspect of that in me. Like when it comes down to it, if I hire you to cut grass and my grass ain't getting cut, what are we talking about? You know? So what about you?
Yeah. So I took it going into internship. We had all the interns take it. And so that would have been 2 years, year and a half, 2 years ago. And at that point, it showed I was a CS.
Okay.
So just reverse of what you are. However, I would be curious to take the work one because I have noticed when I am at work, I have a lot more D tendencies that pop out, which D simply is like you're more dominating. They're going to be the leader of the pack, forging the trail, and yanking everybody with them. But the personalities are really fascinating to me because I've taken a lot of personality tests throughout the years. The one thing,
do you have any I? What is I? I is like
I is your high energy.
You're the life of the party. You are the guy that wants to be seen.
Yeah, the people who want to be on the stage not for like pride reasons, but just because they know how to captivate an audience.
Yeah, and that's kind of where they thrive.
Yes. Like my wife is a high I. She thrives in environments with lots of people. Like that
Most of your pop stars.
Yes.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So she could do that for a whole day and she's wound up. I do that for a whole day and I'm like, get me to my bed.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go to sleep.
Totally worn out.
Like I was saying, I've taken lots of personality tests, and the one thing that I appreciate most about the DISC profile is that it doesn't try to pigeonhole you of like, this is who you are. This is who you'll always be.
Right.
And like, here are your weaknesses that you'll never be able to overcome.
Gotcha.
It very much shows you like, hey, this is who you are. Here are some of your weaknesses and your strengths. Here's how your weakness actually pulls on other people's strengths. And then here's also some weaknesses that you need to grow in. And so like for myself as a CS, I'm again, same thing, information overload. Like I could sit for days researching something before I make even a cohesive thought on it. And I have to learn like, okay, I don't need to have every single fact and understanding of a topic before I can actually start a dialogue with people on it.
Right.
And so it's been a fun journey because once that was brought to my awareness, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Like I do need to honor the people around me and be willing to speak without all of the information because others may have the information that I need.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the DISC profile is definitely something that I've leaned into to learn how to communicate with others.
Yeah. And that's the whole point, is to learn that there are other personalities besides yourself.
Yes.
And that they all interact differently with each other. And so I have to keep that in mind with me, being that when I'm relaxed, I am an S first, which is relational. So how we doing? So if you talk to me on any given day, it's personal to me.
Yes.
And so I have to check that sometimes because not everybody's coming to see how you're doing.
Yes.
And not everything everybody says is a relational question. So you can get your feelings hurt rather quickly, but just for lack of understanding of what's happening, like a high D and a high S generally don't communicate well if they're not actively trying to view the perspective of the other person and where they're at.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what I love about this too, is because like, especially in the position that I'm in, being over the internship program, we have a whole spectrum. Like we got 40 or 30 some interns. And so we have primarily a lot of C's and S's because it's a pastoral internship. But then we do have a few very high I's and few D's, and learning how to communicate in their language is like one of the most beneficial things that you can do as somebody who's over people, because like with your high D's, they're direct to the point, give me the facts and just let me go make a decision.
Yeah.
Whereas like your S's, you need to actually like invite them in, make sure they're good, make sure they're feeling okay about it, make sure their kids and their family's good.
Yeah.
Like
you even coming here, would you like a cup of coffee?
Yeah,
do you want
absolutely.
A bottle of water? Like, is it the right temperature?
Yeah,
how's the light? Like,
those conversations are going to be like 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Just to get an answer, versus your D's, it's going to be like 3 minutes. Slap them with like 60 seconds of facts, give them a second to think, and then they'll make a decision.
Yeah.
But it's so important to know that, because then you can honor them. They feel that they're in a safe environment where they can be heard and understood. And so they're more likely to give their all to it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about it is all four of those aspects, if utilized correctly and everybody knows what they're good at, you can make headway in anything.
Oh, absolutely.
You can just kill it.
For
in
sure.
Any avenue of life. If you build a team that has those four aspects, you can get your I as your front man.
Yep.
Your inspiration guy. You got your D that's like, okay, yes, we're like, okay, C, we're going to actually make a decision and go this way, and it's going to be okay.
Yep.
And S is going to make sure everybody's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I was just talking with some people about it the other day. because so like I have a little bit of a background. For a few years, I was en route to go into like the physique bodybuilding arena, and so I learned a lot about the muscles, joints, and ligaments, and how to grow fast and gain muscle, all this stuff. And the one day I was just kind of meditating on like how to bring the best analogy to the disc profile for people to understand.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden it hit me and I was like, oh, your I's and your D's are your muscles. They're going to be the ones that you see. Like when you look at a person, you immediately see their muscles and their exterior.
Yeah.
Your C's and your S's are going to be your joints and your ligaments. They're the ones that keep the muscles, because if the muscles grow faster than the joints and the ligaments can sustain, it can injure the body.
Is that what happened to like Ronnie Coleman?
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
So you when you get to a certain point, if you're not functionally training, you actually do more harm to your body. And so like a Ronnie Coleman, that man could squat hundreds and hundreds of pounds, but he's like in a wheelchair now, I'm pretty sure.
I think at very best he walks with those canes or I don't know, are those just canes?
I don't even know. They're walking assists because his joints and his ligaments couldn't sustain that type of muscle anymore. Massive, man. And so you've got to be very aware of your body, and the same thing is true with your team. You have to be very aware of your team. And so there are moments where you can allow your muscles to grow fast, but then you have to take the time and actually almost work backwards and make sure your joints can actually sustain that.
Yeah.
So that way your muscles can keep growing. And once you hit that sweet spot, like you were saying, you can make a lot of headway really quickly.
Yeah.
And you can actually see a lot of progress within your team, even within your body. But if you're just trying to get big, flashy muscles, it can actually harm you. And the same is true with the team. If you only have your I's and your D's running forward and trying to pave the way, but you've got no infrastructure behind it,
right,
it's going to fail.
Yeah.
And so that's just like one analogy that I had given to me, honestly, by the Lord, on how to describe how the team functions, because ultimately, like, we're in it for the same goal. We should be, at least. All of us should be on the same page. How we relate to that goal is going to be very different.
Yeah. And so, I think you touched on it before, but it's like you're not stuck. Like you might naturally, for whatever reason, the way you grew up, or I don't know what forms personality. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but you're not necessarily stuck at a level, at a certain letter. If you're an S, you don't have to always be an S.
Absolutely.
You can, if you're willing to learn and basically just stare, like Jordan Peterson says, stare at the darkest parts and find the light. If you're willing to go into yourself and look at your weaknesses, you can build those strengths. And that's another bodybuilding analogy too. It's like you got to start somewhere, and you can unlock a whole world of potential in yourself that you might not even know exists. So you can actually function pretty well. I think there are not very many people I know that even care to function well in all four of those, but that's one of my goals actually, and that's kind of part of what this whole thing is, because this is way outside of what I would even in general care about doing.
For sure.
And I'm trying to learn how to communicate, because that's always been I'm a man of few words, and that's that. I guess that could be a little bit of the contribution there in my personality is I make sure what I say is very to the point. Within like a sentence, you know exactly how I feel about something and what I want.
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to figure that out.
And that is such an important aspect to remember, because especially like for ourselves, as we're following Christ, we're constantly being transformed into his image. And so there are aspects of my personality that are fueled by hurts and wounds and self-protection and guards.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm following Christ and trusting him more, all of those will begin to dissipate because I'm learning to trust and rely on him. And so because of that, there's going to be a natural progression of my personality.
Yeah.
And so, like, I've noticed for myself, when I took the DISC test the first time, I was a CS naturally. I was going through a season where I was afraid to truly be myself because I had just seen a lot of very high D personalities do a lot of damage.
Right.
And so I was afraid that if I actually allow that personality trait to come out, I'm just going to hurt people.
Yeah.
And so then, as mainly through my internship, as I started realizing, like, oh, there's a healthy aspect that you can develop, especially in the context of team. And so then I started to slowly allow myself to have those tendencies, but understand how to have them healthfully.
Right.
So that they aren't damaging to the team, but they're actually edifying to the team. And then allowing the Lord then to work on my heart so that I'm not operating out of fear in any regard. And so I've seen my own personality kind of transform in that. And I'm becoming more comfortable with who I am in Christ because, like, Ephesians shows that I'm his masterpiece.
Yeah.
Like a unique it's a one-of-a-kind masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Never created before, never will be created in time to come, because that's how unique the Lord has created all of us. And so as I'm pursuing him, I'm becoming okay with who he's created me to be, because I'm constantly being transformed in his image. And so it's not this like self-help, make yourself better thing, but it's just truly relying on Christ in you, the hope of glory.
Yeah. And we have, so the DISC test that we took was handed to us from, I think, Danny Silk.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've met Danny and talked to Danny. He's pretty much he's one of the top people for, I don't know, what is his job description? What does he do exactly? Because he's like an excellent counselor.
Yeah, I would say I don't know exactly what his like title is according to his website or his organization, but I would say he's basically like a biblical counselor.
Let's ask ChatGPT.
Let's do that.
Danny Silk is an author, speaker, and church leader who is best known for his work in the field of relationship and communication skills.
There
you go. Yeah, and then it just goes on and on. AI is insane.
Yes.
Okay, it's still typing. I wonder what Joe Biden has to say.
The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer.
All right.
Wise words right there.
You cannot beat that guy in his ramblings. I don't know anybody.
Probably one of the most quotable presidents that we've had.
For sure. You know, George Bush had his moments, not senior. George Bush Jr.
Yep.
He had his moments, for sure. But still, nobody really remembers those now that Joe Biden has said the things that he said. It's really funny. And, you know, I'm not making fun of the president. He says nonsense, so I can laugh at that. It's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I laugh at me when I say nonsense.
Oh my gosh, my friends are ruthless. I'll say something wrong and I'm like, please, for the love of God, tell me that nobody heard that. And then they all just turn and look at me and repeat exactly what I said. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. Me and my wife, we come down pretty hard on each other with those. And it's fun.
Yeah, I warned my wife before the first time she came up to visit my family. I was like, you have to understand, I'm pretty sure my family's love language is jokes and sarcasm.
Yeah.
And she was like, we'll see. And like after the first day, she was like, wow, you weren't kidding. You guys are very like lovingly joking with each other, but you guys go for each other's jugular sometimes. Like, yeah, it's really fun though.
I don't think it's a terrible way to communicate. I mean, unless There you go. Like with the S,
Yes.
if you don't have a relationship already, there's a high potential for things
Yeah.
to go bad there.
Absolutely.
And I've done that to people. I remember one time, man, I was running a crew for a foundation repair company.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember exactly what we were doing on this job, but the homeowner came out to check on me and this other guy we were working with, and he saw me screw something up, like, I don't know, cut a piece of siding or something.
Yeah.
And just totally just messed up the number. It was way off. And he was like, wow. And I was like, yeah, I know. I was like, that's why I have my buddy here, is because, you know, I screw things up and he makes them right. I thought I was building him, like, that was a compliment to me.
Yep.
And somehow he took it so wrong.
Oh, no.
He got so angry at me. He wanted to fight me.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, he was fuming, man. He was ready to walk off the job. And I was like, what is your problem, man? He's like, well, you made it sound like that I don't even know how he.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't really understand where you're coming from, man, but I was really just trying to give you a compliment.
Yep.
Like, you do really good work.
Yep.
I'm sorry. So, yeah. And that wasn't even sarcasm. I was just trying to
Have a fun, lighthearted moment.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Yep. Those are always great when they backfire on you.
So you said you grew up in a Christian home?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Does that mean that you were always on the straight and narrow? Did you always follow the Lord?
That's a great question. So I remember, gosh, I was probably like 8, 9 years old, somewhere in there. I did Awana as a kid.
Okay.
The little Bible study thing for like elementary school. And so one day, one of the pastors at our church came up and just preached the gospel and just invited anyone to come receive Jesus. And so I went up there and I was like, hey, I'll take the booklet, but I want to go do this with my dad. So that night, went home. My dad and I walked through the booklet. I gave my heart to the Lord. And by about 14, 15 years old, I really started pursuing the Lord for myself. Started to really want to see the deeper things of God. I was noticing that there was a lot of surface Christianity. And I was like, none of that's really working. And then I was
Still
seeing
doesn't.
people still doesn't
exists.
and then I started getting exposed to people like a Bill Johnson and Todd and all these what I would say generals in the faith.
Yeah.
And I saw the way they talked about the Lord and they communicated, and I was like, you can tell that they actually have a relationship.
Yeah.
Like, they don't just memorize scripture.
Who's one of your biggest influences in the Christian realm?
Yeah. So I would definitely say the one that had the biggest influence in my life consistently was Bill Johnson.
Yeah. Like every sentence he says is like a gold nugget.
Absolutely. So I would have stuff downloaded on my iPod. I had the moment I got an iPhone, like first thing I was doing was downloading podcasts because I was just the depth of wisdom that man had. I was like, I need wisdom.
Yeah.
And so he was definitely very, very influential. And then I had a season with Todd White and Dan Muller for sure. But pretty consistently, it's always come back to people like a Bill Johnson.
Yeah. And Dan is a whole nother level of.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. So I was pretty serious about my relationship with the Lord. Honestly, like my whole goal as I was in high school doing an early college program as well, my goal was to go into computer programming, go to Bethel School of Supernatural Technology, and then go into a secular workforce and do computer programming and just bring the kingdom of God there.
Yeah.
I was 18 years old, had an encounter with God, and realized that was going to be completely changed. And right around that time too, I was in pursuit of a relationship that I knew full well that I shouldn't be going into.
Okay.
Every
Funny
time,
how that works.
Yeah. I knew the Lord was not on it, but convinced myself and just kept on telling myself like all of the green flags compared to all the red flags that I was seeing. And so in that relationship, I was still pursuing the Lord, but my love for the Lord began to wane. I began to really compromise my integrity and my character.
At what age is this again?
This would have been around 18 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, some were going into...
Which I think is not uncommon.
Not uncommon at all. It was just one of those things where, like, I'm the youngest of 5. And so at that point, all my brothers were either married, engaged, and had their own families.
Wow.
And so it was something that I just desired, like watching all of them come home, bring their spouses or future spouses and the kids. Like I was like, I want to be able to participate in the family in this way.
Yeah.
And so it was like a healthy desire for me, but it became very unhealthy for me, just grasping at anything. And so I'm in this relationship, started really compromising, because like I have very strong convictions on what I watch, what I listen to.
Yeah.
Just to hold myself accountable to what the Lord's called me to.
Sure.
I just slowly started giving that up, even like with my language. I remember one day we're driving in the car and the girl was like, hey, so do you swear at all? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like I'm thinking to myself, like, what kind of question is this?
Yeah.
And then words came out of my mouth that I am not accustomed to saying. And I was like, yeah, sure. And just started cussing like crazy. So I was like, obviously this is what you need to have a godly relationship. And like that was like a marking moment when I realized like my life is going downhill really quickly.
Do you think that in everybody's, I'm sorry to,
Oh, you're good.
I'm just interjecting.
I love questions.
Do you think that swearing in general, I have a whole different view on?
Yeah.
Because I think that in certain realms, like take the military would be a good example.
Yeah.
I know people who are saved and are in the military and it's part of their language.
Yeah.
And so what do you think about that? Like for you, personal conviction, for me, personal conviction, but I'm not offended by any word that somebody says, honestly, at all, unless my wife lets one slide or something.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, I come back to let no unwholesome talk come out of my mouth. And for me, that includes swearing.
Sure.
Like I have a friend.
Because if you were going to swear, it would be in a certain connotation where you meant it to damage.
Absolutely.
I get
where
it. Yeah.
like I have a friend who says a lot of swear words, but uses them in the context of what they were originally used for. And so it doesn't have the same meaning to him. And so he'll say something and I'm like eyes bugging out of my socket. And he's like, do you not know what the meaning of that word is? And I'm like, apparently not. And then he shows me the meaning. And I'm like, oh, I never knew that. And he's like, that's just like the terminology that my family was using for these things. Yeah. So it wasn't malicious or derogatory or anything with some of the words that he was using. And it was just like using them in the context of what the word actually meant.
Right.
So yeah, I would say my personal conviction is I stay away from it. As I do with a lot of things, I would say ask the Lord and let him lead you and guide you. Because if you follow my convictions, you're just going to produce law in your life and then you're never going to hold a standard.
Right. And like, I like to think about the disciples. Yes. They were rough guys.
Yes, they were.
And I think that's what, I think a lot of people in the world looking in on Christianity, they think, oh, well, there was Jesus. He was this holy man and his 12 disciples were just a notch below him, and they were all walking around, just walking on the
little
water,
halos around them,
and they were a rough bunch. Which is why one of the reasons I really like the Chosen series, because it brings humanity into the Gospels. You really see the humanity there, and some of the struggles that some of them may have. Absolutely. Went through processing, like why does Jesus heal all these people, but there's strife in my household, and he knows it, but he's not doing anything about it. It's like, I bet those were some questions raised. And he picked fishermen, which I don't know how many fishermen you know, but you know what I mean? Like, swear like a sailor is kind of a phrase for a reason. And, so there's that. Mm-hmm. So,
the disciples definitely were a rough bunch. I mean, you look at it, you had polar opposites. You would have people who were government officials.
Yeah.
And then you would have or not religious zealots, but zealots who were anti-establishment.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got them coming together and becoming co-laborers with Christ, working together for the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
I think it's just a beautiful picture of like what Jesus does, is he brings polar opposite people who in any other context would be trying to kill each other,
Mm-hmm.
brings them together because of the love of God and shows them that we're brother.
And the intentionality of Jesus picking who he picked,
Absolutely.
that rough bunch of people is, I mean, there's a part of it. There's a lot of reasons he did what he did,
Yeah.
probably more than I even could figure out.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I personally get out of it is that you are qualified
Absolutely.
to do this. Like there's hope for even the roughest person out there.
Absolutely.
And usually, especially like people who are drowning themselves in drugs and alcohol and a certain lifestyles and stuff like that, they're usually, well, I would just go on a limb and say that there's just brokenness in their
Absolutely.
lives, and this is how it's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that you're not too far broken to be a part of this. You're not too far broken for Jesus to use you, for Jesus to save you.
Yeah.
Any of that stuff. Like it's very intentional on why he picked the people he picked.
Absolutely.
It shows you that if you actually read it and you don't just look at the Last Supper picture and
Yes.
all the guys are like, oh, like
Yeah.
it's silliness.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is beautiful because I saw even in my own life, like I never got into drugs and alcohol and sleeping around and all that stuff. But I was actually just talking about this last night. Like I was just as far off in that moment though.
Sure.
When I was not following the Lord, like I was willfully walking away from what he has called me to. I was just as far off as anybody else. I needed a savior just like anybody else.
Well, because from my understanding, the word sin, which is what all of that would be categorized in, means to miss the mark.
Yeah.
So you either missing the mark, like that's that black and white.
Yep.
This is me and my black and white vision seeing this, but you're either hitting the mark or you're missing the mark. And any of that, pick one. It doesn't. It's not like one is separating you from the Lord more than any of the other ones.
Yeah. And even to take it a step further, to relate to your S side, the Hebrew word for sin is to break a relationship. And so sin ultimately is the thing that is hindering and breaking the relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so now it's not only just you're missing the mark, but you're missing the mark in a relationship with God because you are continually pulling yourself away. In that moment, I found myself, and I'll make this disclaimer because it's part of my testimony. I never had sex with this girl.
Yeah.
But I did pretty much anything else that you could imagine.
Sure.
I can remember myself one night laying in the bed and I'm violently shaking. And she's freaking out. She's like, "Are you okay? Are you having a seizure? Like, what's going on?" And I'm like, "I'm okay. I'm just cold, I think." And I hear the Lord saying, "No, this is me convicting you." And your body is literally reacting to the weight of the conviction. And it took about 3 months for me to finally respond to that conviction.
That's intense.
It was one of the most intense moments with the Lord because, I mean, again, you have to think like 3 months prior to this, I had just gotten like my first open vision, massive encounter with God that I know I'm supposed to become a pastor one day.
Okay.
And then now I'm doing all of this stuff that I would be preaching against. So I kept on like believing the best in the relationship. Things are going to change. And things just kept getting worse and worse to the point where even the dynamic of my relationship with my parents, who like are my best friends, began to wane, and they started noticing changes in me. Coworkers were like, "Who is this guy?" Like I was the one that was always fun loving, coming to work with a smile, and now I'm coming in and I'm ticked off, and I mean any little thing would just send me through the roof, get me irate. And so finally I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I literally feel like I'm killing myself every day. And I went down there because she lived about 2 hours away. Went down there and was like, "Hey, this is done. Like I can't do this. You can't do this." Like we're literally just increasing each other's unhealthiness. And so I drove home, and on my way home, I can remember just feeling disgusted with myself. Like
Yeah.
things that I told the Lord I would never do, things that.
Never say never.
Yep. And I can distinctly remember the moment. I can see the overpass. I could tell you exactly where I am on I-75 in Michigan. And I hear the Lord speak to me. And it was just a comforting, reassuring, like, you're in my arms now.
Mm.
Like you came back. And I just got overcome by the love of God, and I started praying in tongues again, which was the first time that I had done that in like 6 months.
Wow.
And I just started bawling my eyes out because I was like, God, I feel completely unworthy. I figured that you would be taking everything away from me and punishing me for this moment, but I'm feeling your embrace. And after that, I was like, here I am. Like, whatever you ask, I'm going to pursue you above anything else. And so at about 18, 19 years old, around that time then, I got very, very convicted by the love of God.
Okay.
And I really started to pursue, what does a relationship with God look like? Because I had a lot of theory and head knowledge before this moment. And those are great, but law is easy to be broken.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can just justify yourself, make it right, and you're good.
Yeah.
But when you have relational dynamics with God, it takes God to restore relationship with God.
Right.
And so to be willing and humble enough to go like, I don't want to do this because I know it hurts our relationship.
Yeah.
And now it's not a like, I'm going to force myself to not do something, but because I love him so much, it just isn't even a desire.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not walking through a mall, covering my eyes, holding on to my wife going, I promise I'm not going to cheat on you. I promise I'm not going to cheat on you.
Yeah.
Like, that's what the law does to us. But my relationship with my wife is so amazing, and I love her so much and so unconditionally that I can walk through a mall even without her. And there's not even a temptation for me to go hook up with somebody.
Right.
Because I'm just so convicted of my love with my wife that desire just isn't even in me anymore.
Right. It's just not a part of who you are.
Absolutely. And that's ultimately, like, that's what the love of the Lord and the fear of the Lord does. It removes the desire for sin.
Yeah.
And
100%.
it's beautiful.
Totally. I mean, I've kind of had a little bit of personal revelation on some things as far as the law is concerned.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out the Lord, and the Old Testament doesn't sound very loving most of the time.
Yeah.
But then you read God is love, and
Yes.
you're like, oh, what in the world? Kind of what I'm looking at and figuring out is everything you see that God did, like kicking Adam out of the garden before he could eat the tree of life,
Absolutely.
was actually a loving act, because I'm not going to let you live forever
Yeah.
in this broken state.
Absolutely.
We're going to restore things before you can live eternally again.
Absolutely.
The law, the 600 and whatever laws of Moses,
Yep.
you would think, man, that's a heck of a lot of law. It is a heck of a lot of laws.
It is.
It's a lot of laws that pretty much nobody can, you would fail. Like,
Absolutely.
you would fail. But what the Lord to me was saying through the law is, until the time I send my son, you still need me,
Yeah.
because I designed you to exist with me in my presence. So
Yes.
you still need me. I have to make an avenue for you to
Absolutely.
hook up with me here, or else you're just going to be completely, you'll just die real quick. Like,
Absolutely.
you're terrible without me.
Yes.
Like so equating that to, and I heard Miles Monroe, who is an excellent speaker.
Phenomenal.
He said, the presence of God is not an option for a human being's life. It's as much as an option as a fish in water.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What are you going to do out of water?
Uh-huh.
You're going to flounder a little bit and then you're dead.
Yeah.
So the law was an avenue to connect with the Lord still.
Yeah.
He's like, still, I kicked you out of the garden, but still still I love you enough to where
Yeah.
I know you need me. So I have to give you this law
Yeah.
so you can be basically as clean as possible.
Uh-huh.
So we can connect.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, like, and I think this is an aspect, and I'm not going to get ahead of myself here, but like we all together forget that God is holy.
Yeah.
And that it requires to be holy to be brought near to God.
Yeah.
And so the law was a way that we could ritually cleanse ourselves by God's standards so that we could be brought near for a moment again.
Right.
And so like the high priest would go through all of these cleansings so that he could then be brought into the holy place and not die.
And can you imagine all of that stuff he went through?
Yeah.
And then like you're 90% through whatever rituals you got to do. And then a lustful thought pops in your mind.
Boom. and
so you're like, well, I'm 90% through, so I'm going to just go ahead and go into the Holy of Holies here. And then you're dead. And
yeah, I mean, they would tie bells onto the high priest so that they could hear the bells jingling as they're doing the ceremonies and rituals and everything. But then at times the bells would just stop.
Yeah.
Because there was something that happened unholy and in the presence of the glory of God in ancient Israel, then the high priest would die.
Yeah.
And so they would have to tie a rope around him and drag him out.
Yeah.
And I think if people just had the revelation that presence lovingly now dwells within you,
right,
your lives would look a lot different.
And it didn't angrily exist in the temple. It's just that God is the end all be all.
Yeah.
So if it's his world. So if we chose to turn away.
Yeah.
And do our own thing, which was our choice given to us by him in the first place. And of course we were going to choose that. Like, to me, it's not even a question. Like, I don't care who is in the garden. Like, if you're given the choice, you're going to choose one day. And it's not like he didn't know that. But so nothing that he's doing is out of hate and anger there. It's about, this is who I am, and this is how you were actually created to exist.
Yeah.
You're so far beyond that right now that your body just can't handle it.
Absolutely. And then the beauty of it is then you see Christ get on the scene.
Yeah.
And he is the God-man who fulfilled all 613 laws.
Right.
To a T. And then he atoned because he was perfect. He was able to atone for the sins of man so that through Christ we could have relationship with God again and be brought near. And now Christ has fulfilled the holy requirements for us to draw near.
Yeah.
But in our relationship with Christ, his holiness will begin to change who we are and reflecting his holiness then as well.
Yeah. Changing from the inside out.
Absolutely.
Well, do you have any closing remarks? Anything you want somebody to know?
You know, the Lord loves you and he wants relationship with you.
Yeah.
That's, if I got one thing to say, it's that.
Right on. Well, it's hard to beat that, even if you do have a Joe Biden sound clip.
But those are very good.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Connor.
Thank you so much, Andy.
All right. Voracious Podcast, out.
Have a good one, guys.
Yep.